Soweto.
Yes.
Real pleasure.
Likewise, man.
Can't stress enough. I mean, when I'm interviewing people like yourself, it's always a challenge because you've answered everything already. Probably 10 times over, to be honest with you.
Somewhere on the internet.
Somewhere on the internet. I mean, when I'm doing my research, I was like, no, I'm not going to do this no more because I'm answering everything. There's no more questions to ask. I'm just going to have a conversation with you.
Sure thing.
So before we even get into some of my key questions, I really wanted to just discuss the album, really. Nonogram?
Yeah.
Tell me about that. Walk me through the process of creating that.
It was an exciting project for me to pull together because very often it's sort of the music leading idea. Something exists in an incorporeal, weird space in my head, and then it comes from the nebulous to something real in the end. With this, I wanted to approach it purely from a conceptual framework first, using numbers, using frequencies, using shapes to create sound, and then letting that trigger the musical process, the creative process.
How did you do that, man? How did you do that? That sounds like a bizarre occurrence.
Yeah.
How did you get yourself in
I think the genesis of it came about because I just finished The Legend of Mike Smith, which is all about the 7 deadly sins, and it's really lyrically turgid as well. Like, I tried to imbibe the idea of being envious or wrathful on each track, and that pushed me as a lyricist in lots of different ways. With this album, I wanted it to be more instrumental, more music, to just communicate those things that lyrics can't, you know? So in terms of like using the maths, with the example of a song called Triangle on the album, it takes 2 central notes. And if you take the internal angles of an equilateral triangle, 60 degrees, and play it as a frequency, 60 would be roughly F sharp or B. And if you then add up all the external, if you add up all the internal angles, then you get 180. And that would be an F sharp. So playing, if you like, the sound of a triangle, playing the interval relationships between the angles, internal and external, you start to get interesting sounds, effectively. You start to get unity and disunity, harmony and inharmony. You start to get discordance, you know, and balance at the same time. And
sounds deep. I mean, for the layperson who just appreciates your music, they're probably not going to connect with that whole concept.
And that excites me too, you know, because I feel that there's a science to pop music often, and the stuff we hear on the radio, that just keeps us consuming. You know, I mean, we just feel it. We don't know the science, but we sort of feel the effects of it. And
like 100 BPMs per minute.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but something that makes you go, I feel like a Mickey D's right now. I could really do with a Coca-Cola. So whatever the science of that is, we're unaware of it, but we're influenced by it. And I feel the same with this. It's just that people should feel a sense of balance without necessarily knowing what it is. They feel the songs getting inside their head and want to hum them and repeat them, you know, like an earworm, but not necessarily understanding how that happened. Just feeling that their consciousnesses in some ways have been elevated. They're in a different space to when they started.
How long did the process take you?
I would say probably a year from the inception of certain songs, and certain beats I'd had in sketch form for probably over three years now. But pulling the album together in focused terms like this, probably about a year.
I want to read a quote from yourself. I am largely inspired by the numerical and sonic aspects of music that transcend cultural differences. You've taken the maths into cultural differences now. Explain that for me.
Great question. I think when I say transcend, I think also give us a different perspective on what they are and how they've come about. We are in an age of division, like unquestionably, and there are camps within politics, within popular culture that are focused on accentuating that division and driving people apart. But whether you're black, green, orange, yellow, whatever language you speak, even if you don't speak an intelligible language, there are laws and principles in maths that will communicate with you. There's the sound of harmony and sound that transcends a lot of these barriers. But even scratching beneath the surface, there are a lot of conditions that I think we as African descended people all around the world are facing, that finding metaphors within maths are fascinating for me. The number 9 itself, the fact that it's in everything and yet invisible at the same time. I'll give you an example. If you add any number to 9 using the digital root system, it simultaneously disappears and is there at the same time. 5 plus 9 is 14, 1 plus 4 is 5. The 9 is gone. You know, any number you add to 9, that happens with. It's in all sorts of laws of angles and geometry, especially using the digital root system. It's not often credited as such. Sounds like some people that you might So, yeah, I mean, not to exclude anyone from that category. I think a lot of the songs that I started to explore that subject on, I found myself talking about a common history between white working class people in this country specifically, and African melanated people's history all around the world, and the fact that, you know, we've often been pitted as enemies. No more so than in the current media climate, actually. Oh, who's going to talk about the underachievement of white working class boys? Black
Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter. All lives matter.
Yeah. White Lives Matter.
Poor white lives matter. Purple lives matter. Stop talking about black people.
Yeah.
You know, all these aversions to talking about the subject that we all need. And I think it's a matter of healing. You know, if I'm talking to a woman about the effects of misogyny, it'll probably make me a better man to understand how that works. But we live in a culture where to start talking, just say the word black, and it's like, well, what do you say I'm angry about? What have you got against white? It's like, this would be better for all of us if we start to look at these subjects from a different framework. And numbers and geometry is an example of that different framework.
It's good that you're bringing attention to this, because I know that a lot of people who are partly or, you know, even just some way invested in your music will be intrigued by it, but they'll share the information as well, which is what I think is kind of key.
Great.
People share music, but they don't often share the message. So it's great that you're doing that. Listen, we're here at the Roundhouse, not quite in the room that we expected to be in, but you know, corner's a corner. You've performed there before. What's it like? You know, is your music well received here? And where does this rank in terms of venues that you performed at? I'm sure you've, you know, probably got a few favourites that are a little bit grander than this space here.
Than this cafe. Well, thankfully, we're not performing in the cafe.
Well, yeah,
we're in the Sackler space.
In the one booth.
You get me? Yeah. Gather round, audience. But it's great. I think it's iconic. It's historical. Much like Jazz Cafe around the corner, where I had a residency with Tomorrow's Warriors for like 4 years as well, playing there regularly. Camden is somewhere, it's an area that holds a special place for me. But I tend not to necessarily see things in terms of prestige when I'm enjoying the playing process. It's great for an audience to know, but it's more about relationships, and there's some great people who work in this building that I've been doing education projects with in Bromley, all over the city, and it's building on those relationships that hopefully draw a new audience in as well to the kind of music I'm playing. But yeah, I've played some great places, man. I played Dizzy's in New York, upstate. I played grand festivals in Morocco, like the Gnawa Festival. We had like something like 200,000 people out in the streets coming to check it. So amazing. Played Montreal Jazz Festival, Montreux Jazz Festival. So it's been a lot of fun, man.
Is there any way you'd like to perform that's not on your is on your bucket list?
Yeah, it's funny. We were just kind of looking earlier at some of my travels around the world. It's been interesting. I've been to Palestine, which is fascinating, in South Africa. Never really played a show in West Africa. I've been before. I would love to do the whole Kumasi, Ghana thing. I'd love to do Amini's Castle, and I feel like I need to do that as a sort of personal pilgrimage, but also there's a new audience. As all my West African friends are telling me, booming up from Gambia to Ghana, you know, Accra, Lagos is killing it right now from what I hear. So I need to be out there.
What about people that you worked with? I see you've worked across the board. There's so many people that have endorsed you, advocated your music. Who would you like to work with, though? If there's like a hit list, top 3 people that you would love to
tricky.
cross triangles with, as it were.
That's one of those questions I should have the answer ready for all the time, because I'm always scratching my head.
Well, that suggests that you've worked with pretty much everybody you'd like to work with.
Yeah, there's no one. no one is good enough anymore.
Well, before you answer that then, what about people that are not here no more? I mean, that you would have if you had the chance, like your Bob Marleys, your Whitney Houstons, whoever.
Yeah.
Anybody on that list?
Tosh, Jimi Hendrix, Fashizi. Man, so I'd be interested to I wonder what Tupac would have sounded like now had he lived, you know, and heard what Kendrick was doing. You know, Kendrick, he's still alive, he's still with us. I'd love to work with that dude.
Kendrick, you listening, son?
Yeah, I hope you're tuning in, dog.
Yeah, man, make sure.
I hear you on the TDE people. You kind of good. Man, Fella. I've been lucky enough to play a couple of gigs with Shaun Kuti, his son, which is incredible, you know. But yeah, to have worked with the master, hey, that would be magical.
You're West
Lucky
Indian, right?
doobie. I'm West Indian, but as the name implies, I mean, it wasn't a name I gave myself. Very much Pan-African-minded parents, Pan-African conscious parents, you know. So, I mean, that's what Grove was like when I was a toddler.
It was.
It's funny, you know.
He was born in the height of Carnival, my friend.
Height of Carnival, real Carnival.
Around there was real community.
Yeah, and we also mash up police and them thing.
Oh, no,
but seriously, in all seriousness, the idea of having an African name, or you know, a lot of my friends are Marcuses and Micahs, biblical
juniors.
But there was a lot also of Omars and Omaris and a lot of appropriating an African history, sometimes a constructed one, but something that gave us an identity that wasn't the one being hoisted on us, you know. I think it's important to reclaim that.
I was going to just ask you that. How important is that to you personally?
It's huge because the framing in all these subjects, I don't want to rail about it, because if we're always defined as slaves, as opposed to enslaved Africans, as opposed to prisoners of war, it disempowers us in all sorts of ways. We forget that we had this rich history that came before this colonial contact, and we also run away from really looking at what slavery was about because of this collective shame about it. So framing the debate, the narrative in different ways, we're survivors, like we're here, and we have something to contribute to the world that has often just not been recognized, you know.
Talking about contributions that ain't recognized, Obama walks out of the White House soon. It's been an interesting 8 years. It's been interesting, for him to get the nod, get the support of the people. What are your thoughts on that whole Obama reign of presidency?
I think it's
what
brilliant.
What do you think is going to happen now that he's there?
I don't hold too much hope out in regards to the political process changing these systemic racial problems, because they've not shifted. And what's fascinating to me is, he was elected to this position, but we knew right at the time of it, I think most African Americans I spoke to, I was in New York in 2009 on Inauguration Day, were very realistic about his ability to actually affect change.
Right.
He bucked up against the Senate, obviously, and bucked up against powerful opponents in Congress, and he's really struggled. So what it showed to me, and at the time I think a lot of people were correctly cynical about it, was that, they run the family business into the ground. They run the household budget into the ground, and they're like, call the black man, he'll come fix it. And how short memories are. The country was on the brink of collapse, if not revolution, where Bush left it.
Thanks to the Lehman Brothers.
Yeah, Lehman Brothers, Fannie Mae, all of those toxic.
All of those phrases we don't even.
Securitized, AAA securitized loans that were. They've completely fallen out of discourse, public discourse.
Credit ratings, AAA credit ratings.
And amazingly, they've been able to, I guess, blame 30 years of neoliberal free marketeering, capitalism, and just a lack of care for people in general, be they working class or otherwise, very self-interested, tiny elite people. And they blame that whole 30 years, which we've had in this country too, of monetarism under Thatcher and continuing, they blamed it on one black dude, or tried to blame it on one black dude, and it's worked for, I think, a groundswell of Trump supporters.
Right.
But it's the elephant in the room. All these subjects, the financial crisis. Oh, well, who are you giving these AAA securitized loans to? Oh, it's the black people again, the ones that you built this whole corrupt system on. The number nines, if you want to call them that. And until you deal with the systemic causes, they can start arresting policemen tomorrow for shooting black people, sure. But that won't cure the systemic issue, which is that they're making money off of black bodies, off of black labor. It's the engine that fuels the entire corrupt political and economic system.
Hillary and Donald aren't going to cure it either, are they?
No, they're not. But I think it's also important for us to take stock here in the West. It's often easy to look at the Pyrrhic achievements of black Americans and, Martin Luther King did great, so we don't have racism over here anymore. Or Hillary and Donald are terrible, and such a lack of candidates. It's a good job our politics is great. It's not. So we need to look at some of these common issues.
Closer to home then, Brexit. Were you for or against?
I was definitely against Brexit, as for Remain, but I'd be foolhardy to say I don't recognise the reasons why people voted out. We've got a perception that we're Great Britain, we're great, because we did great stuff. And this is also, again, about reframing. It's something I'm really passionate about. I was debating the issue with Andrew O'Neill on this week, right at the start of the year. And for me, this subject really is. Let me form my thoughts a bit more. Edit this out, perhaps.
Because when he was with Andrew, he's the kind of man that would probe. Because I find when he sits down with people, black people that kind of have a bit of sense in their head, he really wants to get a sense of where we are and what we're thinking. Because I don't really think our views put forward with any kind of weight.
No.
We might have a view, and that's what they think, but it's not really going to affect the agenda.
It's not, and it's often through, I guess, the initial guise is like, let's just have an open conversation about slavery, but it's or racism or whatever. But it's usually kind of, how can we show statistically that these people haven't got anything to complain about anymore? And that was very quickly where the discussion went. But for me, there was a train of thought that I had that's really important. I'm struggling to connect it. Coffee's not strong enough.
Worry. Now we're leaving though. Do you think we'll be better off?
I struggle to believe.
Time will tell.
Time will definitely tell we'll be better off or not. I struggle to believe how, given the reasons that we left, which is about division, about immigration, they're taking our jobs, I think it's a pretext for things to only get worse. Yeah. And if Nissan has just happened now, has been wooed by some secret carrot that nobody knows about, is it tax? Is it tax avoidance? Are they going to turn Britain into the Cayman Islands now that we're denuded of European regulation? Is it human rights legislation where they don't have to watch their backs no more? Yeah, I mean, it's all closed doors, isn't it? It's all cloak and dagger. So we don't know how this is actually going to manifest itself.
We don't know
what the agenda is. But if these corporations are saying it's going to be wonderful, while the workers don't know, I don't hold out much faith that it's going to result in us doing marvelously well as a result.
Random question, Soweto. Are you a meat eater?
Yeah.
What do you make of this vegan fad over here at the moment? Not even over here, worldwide, and this whole push to eat live food.
I'm in two minds about it.
So
I think the raw food, quite possibly. I'm in two minds about it because I think, having been to something called Zero Carbon Britain, where you look at the actual ecological, environmental impact of the way we grow meat. It's not the principle of eating meat, it's the labor-intensive, agri-business nature of it. Anyone who's seen Cowspiracy told you that, 6,000 times the emissions of cars and airplanes. So it's kind of hard to morally justify just wanting to eat steak, But by the same token, the way that people are getting on this bandwagon speaks to me about the cognitive dissonance in our culture. It's like there's so much genuine sexism, racism, inequality happening, that if I just don't eat meat, and I'll feel better about myself, and change my Facebook profile flag to Belgium or France or something like that, or rainbow, just to show I'm a nice person. These are sometimes quite superficial ways of avoiding this cognitive dissonance that we all feel, wanting to be good people, but no, we're living in this really fundamentally messed up society.
Your build is the man.
I really want to remember what the hell I was going to say about Brexit. Cool.
Your build is the brains behind the Birmingham flyover. That's a big moniker to have, my friend.
Yeah, well, thank you.
That flyover was needed.
Yeah, man.
Why are you built just the brains behind it? For those who don't know.
It actually interestingly ties into the whole nature of the Andrew Neil conversation and things like this. I was listening to Nate Parker, this is a very indirect way of answering your question, talking about the exceptionalization of gifted or talented or successful black people. You've made a film, you've done all right, you shouldn't complain about racism or anything like that. I've been to Oxford, I've sold albums, I've toured the world. Why am I whinging about inequality and racial disparity and blah, 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 blah. And for me, it was important to contextualize myself within their history, a very rich history of black British musical expression, and to be unashamed of that. Not to say this is a confrontational thing, but I don't just come out of thin air. Like Steel Pulse's founder, one of the founder members of Steel Pulse, lived on the same street as me growing up. Julie Dexter lived just down the road. She's in Atlanta making all sorts of music now. Birmingham alone has this rich heritage, and many of them were there at the flyover this year. Black Symbol, rest in peace, Andy Hamilton. I come from this rich heritage. And that strengthens me. This isn't all altruism. Like, I know how much more power that gives me to say, I grew up in Ladbroke Grove. Aswad was there in the background, you know what I mean? I grew up around Courtney Pine and Steve Williamson. Because what the media and the industry likes to do is to extract people and say, look, everything's okay. There's no problem here. And I want to say, actually, nah, all the people that gave me my startup, that level of consciousness and the musical desire to excel, have come from communities and places that aren't often recognized by the mainstream. And it's very important, again, for me to say to younger musicians and artists coming up, this is the methods, these are the means, this is how you can replicate success. No one's gonna give it to you, be you poor, white, black, from any background. This kind of deferential attitude that we've got in the music industry, I sound great in my bedroom, so someone's gonna find me. No, we've got to find ourselves within our communities and find a way of sharing that with the world.
Really important you saying that, and I'm going to get back to, younger generation and how you see that, evolving and coming up behind you off of the back of your success. But still on the subject of Brum, how's that changed for you since the turn of century. Let's go back.
Let's go back 16 years, all the way back then.
Yeah, I mean, because these millennials are not going to appreciate the journey, but you can. I mean, how's it changed, and how's that changed positive?
It's changed in a multiplicity of ways. There's been some positive and some negative change. I think when I first started getting into jazz, there were quite a few live music venues to play, and then there was a real dark period at the beginning of the noughties where Ronnie Scott's closed down and became a strip club. The Fiddle and Bone stopped doing live music, and there was a real dearth of opportunities to play live music. And I stepped in that period to try and start doing things like live box jam sessions and the Flyover Show, which is still happening now. I think there's been a lot of development. The old concrete ballroom came down and a new glass concrete one went up. And pretty, you know, it's developed retail and luxury apartment culture like we've seen up and down the country. But this has often been at the expense of genuine grassroots cultural evolution. And what I think Birmingham has that London struggled with is it's held on to some autonomous communities. You know, that's meant that often we're not integrated. You have ghettos, you know, Alum Rock's very Muslim, Handsworth is now more Eastern European but was very black, and communities don't necessarily integrate. But one thing is, man, I like being able to know where I can get a curry patty from and curry goat and some jerky. It does, and that sense of community is something that we've retained.
It's also getting quicker and quicker to get to and from London. It's got to be a positive thing.
Yeah, and get out of London. I love London, but I feel like they stole my city from me. I mean, I went to nursery.
You feel like that?
Yeah, I went to nursery in Kensal Green, Lambeth Grove. I went to primary school, Oxford Gardens, and South London, and all over the place. And these areas now, from Wandsworth to Brixton, where my mum now lives, would be impossible for me to move into, even as a successful musician, to be able to buy a property in some of these places. You got one-bedroom flats selling for £1 million in Brixton, when 15 years ago these people wouldn't have stepped a foot in these areas.
Didn't we miss a trick, though?
Yeah.
Why?
We always do.
Why did we miss it?
And I've got an aunt in Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn where it's the exact same phenomenon.
Same thing.
We move in, we build up an area that had been destroyed by the war, or this white flight, whatever the reasons. We develop cultural capital because it now becomes cool to go to a Mangrove or a Dub Vendor or a Dog Star, the Fridge, or enough of these places. And then just money, you know, it's like we get refracted, sent to other parts of the country and don't have that autonomy that means that you can have the sort of cultural traction that Balti has in Birmingham, Golders Green, Southall, other parts, other communities.
Sad state of affairs.
Yeah, but it's not all doom and gloom.
No, because we can now make those opportunities wherever. London will keep growing.
Absolutely.
Not as quick as it did post or pre-Brexit.
I think for us, as again African descended people, it's about identifying where our futures lay and redefining the narrative again, so we're not reacting to circumstances. Oh, they've moved us out of Peckham, where are we going to go? Oh, they're shooting us on the streets, what are we going to do? It's like having an agenda, having a vision of ourselves as fully British, as fully black, and being congruent with those identities.
You mentioned the youngsters earlier on. If I was a young, aspiring saxophonist, rapper, all the monikers fly under, I've been looking at your journey as a template for success. You know, is it important for you to kind of provide that for that next generation?
Hugely.
And how in your way are you sending the lift back down?
It's hugely important for me because, particularly as a jazz musician, the examples that I had around me showed me something very different to the dominant culture in the music industry, inverted commas. I met Wynton Marsalis when I was 13. Dude, at the end of his concert, takes me and another 13-year-old drummer to one side, and he's just asking us questions about jazz, and we're playing some piano, and I just felt like a baton being passed on, and we're still friends to this day, you know. Courtney Pine brought me around to the house, gave me a mouthpiece, Reeds, Steve Williamson and I, people I looked up to from afar, brought me into this thing called jazz, and then we're like, this is how you do it. Gary Crosby, Denise Baptiste, Jason Yard, peers and those directly before me passing the baton on. So it would be remiss of me to not do the same. And you also learn something in the process of teaching, learning that we can imbibe lessons from, not to sound too cryptic, but from our ancestors that aren't necessarily given to us in the mainstream. They're not like, oh, this is how you become a wonderfully signed, tremendously successful musician. That's not it. This is the craft. This is the art. You know, these are the voices of people who built on traditions to produce excellence, and it's our duty to continue to do that.
Are you actively doing it, or is it something you find that you may do?
I'm very much actively doing it, and it's
Give me
a
an example,
huge thing behind the Flyover show.
Right.
If you looked at the roster this year, we had Ernest Ranglin and Eskom Mutangwazi, who are two internationally credited and recognized and huge artists, but then the entire rest of the bill was Birmingham-based artists, some of whom are established, some of whom are up and coming. And from one of them, I remember J. Sosa saying when he saw Wordsworth perform, come from New York and perform a freestyle at the Flyover show like 4 years ago, he got on his pen game. He was like, I'm inspired, I need to write. And he performed this year. And I'm sure there's some teenager we don't know about who was in the crowd who clocked it and was like, okay, it's bars, it's spitting, but there's live instruments there as well. Maybe I should talk to some piano players. Maybe I should get on my mojo and practice an instrument. People seeing connections and synergies there that, again, aren't necessarily publicized. That is the point of the Flyover show. It's this derelict corner of Birmingham that nobody particularly cares about. Only makes the news when people do something bad. And I've noticed how, probably since 2011, the words black and gang have been interchangeable, which disgusts me. We've got this really rich culture, and anytime there's a black subject, so-and-so from the gang rehabilitation organization is on the news as about it. It's like, what's that got to do with black? It's criminalization that's been foisted on us again for a very long time, and we need to escape that narrative.
Reframe, I think.
Thank you.
I'm with you. Saxophonist, band leader, composer, rapper, radio presenter. Do you sleep?
I sleep when I'm dead. No, I like to keep active, basically, and it's also all these things are connected in lots of different ways. I feel that being a radio presenter with this new show on BBC Radio 3 facilitates me talking to musicians in a different way. Like a lot of these cats, Robert Glasper, Shabaka, I mean, growing up playing saxophone together, and I can talk to them anytime, but this context gives me a way to kind of get into their process and unlock that for other people. And I'm learning things about my own practice and process and composition, and learning other methods and approaches from people like Tor Gustafsson and Scandinavian musicians that I wouldn't necessarily have checked on my own volition, but this is bringing me into the wider world of jazz, and I'm enjoying it. Then I'm, finding new artists that I can program for Flyover shows up and down the country. I'm using things from my theatre practice. There's a play version of my last album, The Legend of Mike Smith, which is going to be opening in Hackney early next year. So I'm learning every single time these apparently disparate things are happening. I'm learning things that make me a more cohesive and competent artist.
So what does it look like the next, I was going to say next 5 years, but you're so busy, I'm going to say the next 12 months. What does it look like?
Just trying to get through it one day at a time. But I'm really excited about, again, a lot of things coming together. People have probably seen my Twitter timeline for the past 6 months since Brexit. And one of the offshoots of that, and the conversations I've been having with people in Momentum and stuff as well, is I'm going to be supporting Jeremy Corbyn at a charity fundraiser in Brighton. He's my hero, man. I ain't going to lie. He's a speng. He's a Don Dada. Standard.
He come under attack this year.
And he stood up like, simmer up.
Yeah.
Bad boy. I can't move me. Took the shots, ducked them, ducked others. Like, backhanded some of the shots. And I'm tremendously impressed.
Why he won't come under the level of attack he did, but
I'm pretty clear on some of the reasons he has, and that's part of the epiphany that I think we all need to go through. There's lots of reasons why I'm personally drawn to him, but one that's relevant here is that he talks about being politicized when he went to Jamaica and organising a speech with Walter Rodney, and this was like bing, bing, bing. So the emancipation of African peoples all around the world fired a switch in his head, which is like, humans everywhere can get on with this message. I think that's what Britain needs to learn, as opposed to having anxieties about race relations and the past of slavery and guilt about it. It's like, this is how we can all become better humans, and that seems to be somebody lifelong who signed up for that, fighting apartheid, the Iraq War, women's representation. You look at his voting record and you're like, this dude is a done. He's done it.
Career in politics then?
Possibly, I don't know. I'm very suspicious of the whole process.
Politics.
And this is the politics, and this is the reason why he's come up to the second part of the point, why he's come up such virile hostility, such strong, derision. Because having read a book by Martin Williams called Parliament Limited, you realise our entire system is compromised. Lobbying groups, second jobs. We're talking like a lot of these ministers are board of directors of companies, and they don't have to declare them because of the Companies Act of 2006. BAE Systems, Lockheed, Boeing, all these great companies that manufacture instruments of death around the world. We've eclipsed China and Russia to become the second largest exporter of arms around the world. And along comes somebody who's, the only people who bankroll him are Stop the War Coalition. You know, his only expenses are minimal. It's like almost double, literally just 10 quid or something a year for his expenses. And he's hitting this sclerotic institution called the Houses of Parliament, where they're all on the make. The one thing that both sides of the House can agree on, so 87% of them are private landlords. They have interests in private finance. And it's very difficult for anyone to speak out against that because you'll just be marginalized. And you also see the media colluding in it as well. So for the first time, it's a breath of fresh air. Most people who support him can just see how
offering a new type of politics.
It's a new part of politics, a new way of doing things that isn't about who's speaking behind you, who are you speaking on behalf of. It's actually speaking on behalf of people that vote, 300,000 membership support and 600,000 people within the membership. It's huge, and it's a sea change, and I just wish we'd get behind it, because many years we've been sort of like, oh, the Illuminati are doing this, and you know, these private interest groups, and it leaves us feeling really disempowered. And this is completely different, and I'm all for it.
Well, listen, you're going to be promoting your album, Nonogram, for the foreseeable. Do you get to enjoy Christmas? Do you take a break? Do you have downtime?
Can I just remember the point I was going to make about?
Cool.
I got it. Very interesting things happen around race identity with Brexit for me. And people that I grew up with, went to nursery with, in the likes of Kensal Green or Handsworth, many of them white, and not the private school, but the state schools, were sort of third generation immigrants like me, you know, Irish often, Polish, Romanian. I had a crush on this Romanian girl like when I was 7 years old, but she was Cockney. One of my mates at primary school in Oxford Gardens was a Kurdish refugee. So he's like 35 now. He spent his entire life virtually in England. So marketing these things as new challenges for me was part of the delusion, the deception that helped to create a Brexit. And particularly large groups of white working class people essentializing this notion, this notion of whiteness as something pure that bonded them to people in Berkshire and Hertfordshire against the foreigners, against asylum seekers. It's very pernicious, and it's a lie. And you look historically, anytime poor people look like they're getting together, the extreme right or some political, intrusion stops that from happening. There was a great film Don Letts just made about skinhead recently on iPlayer, Wicked, and it just shows you this is how skinhead happened. Poor white kids getting into Jamaican culture, wanting to be a bit black, shaving their heads, wearing drain pipe trousers and that, and creating this new hybrid culture. And people go, "Ooh, this is powerful. We can use this to sow division and hatred." And then you have these bizarre spectacles of booking two-tone ska bands to play, and half the audience Zick Highland them at the front of the crowd. Like, what's going on there? Madness. And that's where we are now. Like, these people who grew up loving ragga, loving hip-hop, being part of this hybrid inner-city urban culture, now being, drawn off and picked off against each other. And as a historian, I did history at Oxford. This story has gone back to the 18th century when you had black agitators on the streets of London back then saying it's not even about race, it's not even about slavery, it's just about money. And if we get together and change the system, we'll all be better off for it.
When do you break? When do you chill? When do you have downtime? When do you assess how much of an impact this Nonogram has made?
Yeah, it's a good question.
And you go again on that. Or how does that work?
I'm going to be hitting South Africa for like 3 weeks or so over Christmas. Right. That's like my war plug. I love this country, and I feel most patriotic when I discover people like Jeremy Corbyn. Like, he couldn't exist in any other country. Slightly eccentric woodwork teacher, someone described him as. Like, I love the dude, and it makes me patriotic that this country can produce people like that. But the intensity of inequality, the intensity of sort of subliminal racial madness that's going on, just makes me need an escape often. I need to plug myself into the wall charger and re-energize myself. So that's where I'll be in South Africa doing that with some friends and family over Christmas. Joburg, Durban.
Durban got the Commonwealth Games.
That's wicked.
A couple of years
Yeah,
now,
that's right.
Yeah, it's a good look.
Yeah.
For them. Are they ready? The area? Is it? I haven't been.
Yeah, man, and it faces many of the same challenges we face here. Globalization, global capital, facing the challenges of black people being allowed to work together, in the superstructure.
Zuma's under pressure.
Zuma's under pressure, but the whole country's often under pressure. Willing buyer, willing seller didn't work with land redistribution. We've got issues with big corporations fulfilling their quota of black employees, but they're never hitting the board level. They're just there, making the place look apparently more racially balanced. So systemic versus superficial change seems to be a problem all around the world.
I said that was my last question, but it's like married, kids?
Not yet. Working on it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Are you?
Yeah.
Do you like that, the big family, the big house?
I think it's one of them, when I start, I'm probably just going to start breeding and not stop. So I'm like 50, it's come with a tribe of pinches.
Spoken.
Yeah, but just breed up woman,
Yeah.
not woman, just breed them.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. Yeah.
Future.
Yeah,
It's a future.
it's definitely a future thing, and I want to be as productive as I can be now.
I can imagine as a father, you'd have so much to give back to your kids. So.
Maybe so little time to do all the other stuff I'm doing as well. But having seen an example of my dad, he brought me along to rehearsals. That was hugely formative for me. He's never been rich at all, but been very active, very successful.
He was rich
culturally wealthy.
There you go. It's not
tremendously
too much value
wealthy.
placed on that.
Exactly, and the people I had a chance to meet and grow up around made me the person I am now. So I'd like to impart that to some other little ones at some point in the future.
Well, listen, man, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for your time.
Thank
I know you've got a
you,
busy day ahead.
Respect.
Know that we'll catch up soon, and all the best for the album and future success.
Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram.
All of that.
Buy my album. It's hot.
All of that.
It's buzzing. It's flying off the shelves. Peace. Thank you.